Hey, Las Vegas fruit lovers, and today, more specifically, my crazy fig friends, because fall is in the air, and when fall comes around, cutting season is in full swing in some parts of the country. And with cutting season comes often some confusion about some of the terms and terminology and the words that are used and the way that cuttings are classified. And rightfully so, because people use terms that they grew up with, or common sense terms, what appears to be common sense terms, on how they classify a cutting or what they call it in various stages. And even different groups or commercial groups use different terminology, and it can be confusing. And those different terms they don't necessarily conflict, they just mean different things depending on which group is using them. And one of the things, a good example is the timber industry. In the timber industry, you'll hear terms like softwood and hardwood and greenwood. And in the timber industry, that means something totally different than it does in horticulture or in botany, and the terms that those folks use. So in the timber industry, hardwood and softwood relate directly to and only the density of the wood. They measure that in pounds per foot at how heavy it is, because hardwood, like oak or hickory and that type of thing, weighs more than softwood does, like the conifers, pine, spruce, some of that kind of stuff. It's just an example of what that is. Whereas in the world of botany, greenwood, softwood, hardwood means something totally different. They don't contradict, but they're not talking about the structure of the entire tree. They're talking about the stages of growth in that, and it can get confusing. And this is not about to correct anybody that's using the wrong terminology or different terminology. It's just, hopefully it'll help you understand. So understanding that about the timber industry, let me flip you around here, and we'll talk about the structure of a limb and how it most often is correctly talked about. Okay, on the structure of a limb, and overall in the tree, in the horticultural world, you have really two kinds of growth. You have primary growth, which is extension, growing up, and secondary growth, which is expansion. And extension is where you have new growth coming out, and expansion is where you have development of that growth. And they use also three terms there also: softwood, hardwood, semi-softwood. And the term green also comes into play, but it has nothing to do, again, just like the timber industry, with the pigment or the color of anything. So even though this is new growth, primary growth that comes out, and this way on every tree, it comes out, it is the color green, but this is termed as softwood. And it's termed as softwood for obvious reasons. That's the common sense thing that makes sense. But you can take, some of these branches and they snap right off. And whereas if you get further down the structure of the limb, it starts turning darker and darker, and then gets down to a limb that has a full bark structure on it. And that is often called, another term that you'll hear pretty often is lignified. And so these terms are brought down to being: green colored wood is softwood, fully barked or lignified wood is termed as hardwood, and that in between is semi-hardwood or semi-soft. Either one of those would be correct. So getting back down to the lignins or lignified, lignins are a part of the cell structure of all plants, probably secondary to only cellulose. But lignins are a cell that helps bind the other cells of it together during its secondary growth to harden it off. So you'll hear that term often also. It's hardened off, it's lignified, and some people will say that it's hardwood. And those lignins are a glue kind of. I think the correct term is really it's an organic polymer that's within the structure of the tree itself that helps it develop into a more stable and hardwood. So that really is the differences between the two industries. Now we'll have some people that'll say they are green cuttings, and they refer to, green in color. And you're never going to change that. It's always going to be that way. But green, just like in the timber industry, has nothing to do with the pigment and the color of it. It has to do with the moisture content. In the timber industry, a tree can be cut while it's green, meaning that it is actively growing and there's an active transfer of moisture or sap from the roots to the tree. And some trees can be cut okay, like pine and that kind of stuff can be cut okay while it is green, and it's easy to cut. Other things like the hardwoods, hickory and oak, and that it typically is only cut in the fall or winter of the year, when there is no sap flowing, because it's a lot less difficult to cut in that stage. So the moisture content is measured, and it can be green in the timber industry even after it's cut, until the moisture content comes to a certain place. So when we're talking about green, that is moisture content is what it should be referring to. And it's kind of easy to say here. I just snapped that softwood cutting off, and it's actively flowing the latex or the sap out of it. And as long as the tree is growing and is not dormant, you're going to have this active transfer of sap from top to bottom, with the transfer of nutrients and blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff that goes along with it. And as the tree goes dormant later on in the year, this sap flow will decrease, and then the tree becomes dormant. So if you take, let's say, a leaf off this and snap it off, you get the same thing. You've got sap, especially in a fig, where it's producing this latex because it's got active flow of sap going up and down the tree right now. And as the tree becomes dormant over a period of time, these leaves will fall off involuntarily, and there will be no sap on it. So moisture content is what we're talking about, and should be talked about when you're saying green. And how does that affect the cuttings when it comes down to figs or really anything else? And let me say that any of the cuttings that you take, whether it be a softwood cutting, semi-softwood, or hardwood, regardless of the time of year you take it, it has the compounds in it, and that is, if you look on rooting hormone, its primary ingredient, the only thing that helps it is I3BA. It's indole 3-butyric acid, and that again is something that's in the cell structure of a plant. And some of them have more than others. That's the reason that sometimes rooting hormone is almost a requirement. With figs, it's not. Different people have different opinions about that. I think they root faster with some additional rooting hormone, but you don't have to have it. But anytime that you take a cutting from a tree, it can root. There's no question whether it is any of the three types of wood or what time of the year it is. I've rooted cuttings probably every month of the year. However, the moisture content of those cuttings and the viability of them over a period of time is what's important there. And what that magic number is, let's say if I do a cutting in summer, if I come out and just snip off this the tip of a branch and root it right away, it's got a better chance. If I try to store this for any period of time, and I don't know what that magic number is on that period of time, it becomes more difficult. It only makes common sense that the more moisture content that a cutting or any type of wood has in it, the higher probability it has of desiccating, of rotting, of mold forming, and all those things that go along with it. So there's just kind of the differences, and I hope that helps you understand which one is best. I'm not going to get into an argument with anybody on that, because a lot of people are taking cuttings right now and storing them and selling them, and I can just tell you, here comes opinion, and it's my opinion only. Again, I've rooted every month of the year in every type of wood. but anybody that's been doing this for any length of time will tell you that a fully lignified hardwood, hardened off cutting roots easier than the semi-soft or the softwood does. People who are selling cuttings should never be selling a softwood cutting green in color. These things are difficult, and anybody that's been doing this for any length of time, I don't think will dispute that. These cuttings are more difficult. They'll root, but they're more difficult to root. If they're cut and tried to be stored, these are useless, and nobody with any morality at all in the business should be selling a softwood cutting. Now, can this green in color softwood cutting be green as far as moisture content? Sure. When this goes dormant, is it still a green cutting? No. It's a softwood cutting, but when it's dormant, the moisture content of it is low, it is no longer green. However, if you come down here and you cut this hardwood cutting right now, when it's actively growing, that also should be considered as a green cutting. Now, having said that, I have a lot of friends, coast to coast, that are of the opinion that if they take their cuttings early, and a lot of reasons why the people in colder areas want to take their cuttings early, this is a semi-tropical plant. It will, too much cold will kill it. And especially these softwood tips, as they are, if these ever get a freeze, it'll kill them. And depending on the amount of freeze, it can kill some trees, die all the way down to the ground, depending on what climate zone you're in. But some of those thoughts are that if you take this cutting, and granted, the cooler it gets and the less transfer that happens, probably the more viable these cuttings are for a longer period of time. But some people are of the opinion that you can take this cutting while it's actively growing, refrigerate it, and it will be the same as it going dormant. I don't know if that's the truth or not. I know that in nature there's two types of dormancy, and one of them is a forced dormancy. Typically, dormancy happens like it is now. Slowly, the temperatures start lowering, especially at night. The days become shorter, and they go into dormancy over a period of time. They actually just go to sleep. There's also a forced dormancy that happens in nature. Sometimes it can happen because of fire, or because of extreme weather, and a tree will shut down. So, I don't know scientifically if you cut this and store it, if it will go into, a technical dormancy. I can tell you from experience, however, that, and again, I don't know the magic number on it, that these cuttings that are cut before they are dormant, they will root. There's nothing wrong with that. But as far as long-term viability of them goes, as far as storage, and these guys have got to store these and ship them, and what that magic number is, they don't last as long as something that is cut when it's fully dormant. And that's the reason you have some people, let me take you a walk around here, you have some people that will only take cuttings when they're dormant. And personally, that's the way I think things are. And it just so happens I got a little bit of an example. I was cleaning out my refrigerator in the garage, getting ready for cutting season coming up, although it's going to be a few months away from me. And I found a couple of bags of cuttings out there that I just flat forgot about. And these were cuttings that I took in January of this year, so they're 10 months old. This is not the proper way to root things. Don't take this as a rooting tutorial, because it's not. I just didn't want to throw them away. I had a bucket with some good soil in it here. This is under the porch, don't get any sun. And the rooting part of it is not important. What is important is to see that, as I checked them and I cut them, there was a good vibrant cambium still under them, and you can see that obviously these were struck on the 20th of last month. So, it's been about 2 weeks. And they were viable cuttings, and they're starting to grow. Whether these are going to root and I end up getting a tree or two out of this, I don't know. Now, on the other hand, right here, are a couple that I put in individual cups, and this again is a cutting that is from January, and you can see it's trying to push a new leaf here. Hasn't put out any roots yet, but again, that was about 2 weeks ago. And here's a cutting that I intentionally took during the summer, and I can't remember if this was, you know, a month or two ago, but it was a limb that needed to be trimmed, and I just cut it. I put it in a bag just like these were in, and put it in the fridge, and you can tell the obvious difference between the two of them. And this one is virtually, it's dead. I can guarantee you that. Let me get it here where I can snap it, and yeah, it's just dead. Now here's a good example. Here is a fully lignified, hardened off wood that I cut while it was actively growing, so it was green. Stored in my refrigerator for at least a month. I don't know exactly when it was, but put in, brought out of the refrigerator at the same time, same conditions. You know, this one, there was two of them in here. I checked the other one earlier, and it was the same way. So, you know, it's just my experience that a dormant cutting has more viability. It's easier to root, and certainly I don't think there's any question about it. Because I've bought cuttings from, you know, the colder climates when they weren't dormant, and some of them root and some of them don't. But my success, I'm just telling you personally, my success, unless you can cut them and root them right away. Now, if somebody's done those cuttings and they get them to you right away and they've not been stored for a long time, they're probably just perfectly okay. But again, I'm gonna make somebody mad by that statement, but it's just kind of the way it is. Not intending to make anybody mad, not intending to point a finger at somebody saying something right or wrong. Just hopefully this will help you understand some of the terms. Whatever you're doing, happy rooting. Look to see you later.